several fitness related questions come in, ranging from, improving biomechanical deficiencies to thinking about spraying and conditioning. So, if you have a question, drop it in the chat. I want to thank Redmond Equine wearing their salty shirt and a huge fan of their products. And if you use my code JECB20, you can get 20% off their minerals in the store. And I have the Relight product here, which is their powder that I put in my water every day. It is so fantastic for helping you stay hydrated. So let's kick things off. I have a couple questions that we'll cover this evening. Try to do this again next week. So if you email me throughout the week with your questions, chances are good they might end up on the live chat here. Sally from Oregon wrote in. She has a 2-year-old filly, and obviously the horse is too young to ride at this point, but she wondered if I might recommend training the horse to ground drive and or drive to actually pull a cart. And she does have access to a trainer for that, somebody she knows and trusts. So, full disclosure, I was raised in a carriage driving family. So, I am a huge fan of driving horses when that's appropriate and when you have access to a knowledgeable source, because driving does have inherent dangers. Not every horse takes to it as readily as others. That said, if the training process is done really carefully, it can develop really wonderful top line muscling, particularly in the extensor muscle chain, the top line muscle chain. And I find that horses that start out driving like in their 2 and 3-year-old year, so no weight on their back, all their growth plates are still closing, their bodies are still growing and developing. So you don't have any weight on their back. You have very little concussive forces traveling down through the limbs on those really sensitive structures in the lower limb, the hoof capsule. Driving allows us to teach a lot of the basics and rhythm and just good, relaxed movement to horses without all the physical detriments that not only riding can bring, but too much repetitive circling, lunging. Because sometimes people just run out of things to do with their young horses, right? You want to work with them to build them up a little bit, but if we do too much circling or um, we're eager to ride them and we get on them and we do too much, we can end up obviously really causing more damage than we want to. So to answer Sally's question, yes, if that is an option for you, driving is a wonderful, wonderful activity. It develops a beautiful, smooth muscling in the top line. What I mean is, you don't typically with driving horses, you don't see a lot of like the bunchiness in different muscle groups or the separation that you can sometimes get between, for example, like the hamstring muscle group and the quadricep muscle group, where you get like that poverty groove, which comes sometimes from the burden of carrying a rider, as I said, sometimes repetitive circling, being worked into a contact too quickly, these types of things. Typically, and again, I'm biased, grew up in a driving family, but typically with driving, you end up with this very beautiful, smooth, soft, pliable top line muscling, which is terrific. And like I say, you're instilling the basics of good rhythmic moving, arena patterns, and you're just going to build on that when it comes time to ride. So that was our first question. Next question is, I had a couple of you who either got my Stifle download plan on my website, the 4-week conditioning plan, or you just reached out because you have a horse that has stifle problems. So, for those of you that have not dealt with locking stifles, that's great. You're lucky. A stifle that locks can look really, really troubling to us. It can look like the leg is like trying to break or something, like the hind leg just gets locked in place. And it's not that uncommon for young horses. Typically, if they're going through a growth spurt, it can rear its head. Um, like I say, it's more troubling for us humans to see, so we tend to worry a lot about it. It tends to disturb us. It's usually there's usually not pain related for the horse. It's usually just a mechanical glitch. That said, many owners get very worried about it. Now, even though it's typical in young horses, I have seen this condition in horses as late as 5, 6 years old, and I have known horses for whom, based on their conformation and the angle of their stifle, it can sometimes rear its head throughout their life. The moment that there is an inflection in their fitness level and or their body weight. So, like if their feeding program changes, even a small amount, and they put on a little bit extra weight, and or the the food changes and they're getting more sugar, more inflammation, even though it could be minor, horses that are more prone to this condition, this locking stifle, the condition will like rear its head briefly. Like all of a sudden one week the horse will start locking its stifle or slipping its stifle. And you'll say, "Like, God, I thought we got over that, right?" So one of you in particular wanted to know, she was working through the stifle download program and it looked like the horse was maybe a little bit uncomfortable or a little wary of some of the exercises like backing up, some of this more stationary kind of calisthenics. The horse wasn't, like, being aggressive, but there was obviously a lack of fluidity and maybe some concern, and, obviously, you don't wanna force a horse when they are clearly telling you no. But if there's some signs of they're feeling things and maybe there's a little bit of concern, but they're in the exercise, they're trying the exercise, then yes, these exercises are very effective when you do them in the dosage that they're given in the plan. Obviously, we're not overdoing anything, but fitness 8 out of 10 times fixes this problem with the stifles. So you trust the process, trust the exercise, it's going to work. Even though your horse might look like they're struggling a little bit, it's the same way as, you're going to struggle a little bit with a PT exercise until your body adapts to it, gets new neuromuscular connections and those sorts of things. So, like I say, if the horse is just outright, they're rearing, they're biting, they're really the anxiety is ramping up, then no, we can modify the exercise. We can find other exercises. But typically, this is one of those trust the processes moments. Trust the process, trust the exercise. And the third question I'm going to tackle was I've had some questions come in. I don't know if these are older horses or they're younger horses that are dealing with some arthritis. And that said, I don't know the severity of the arthritis, but there's been some questions about how to modify ground pole routines for horses with arthritis. Again, it's kind of like it depends. It depends how bad, how far along the arthritis is. It kind of depends where the arthritis is. If it's in the hocks, and I'm going to guess maybe this was, I typically for those horses will suggest not raising ground poles because we're with ground poles, we're not really working on flexion of the hocks. We're really working on the value, the real value of ground poles is it is one way to interrupt habituated movement patterns. It's one way to kind of override the central pattern generator, uh, from where the horse just creates movement without full nervous system involvement. So that's the real value, and we can still get that with poles on the ground. So if it's, pretty significant hock arthritis to the point like where a horse no longer wants to walk down an incline, if they're telling you that's not comfortable anymore and the arthritis is pretty progressed, then I would recommend modifying the ground pole routines by keeping poles on the ground. No need to raise them for your particular horse. The other thing is like if this is an older horse, maybe they're in their mid 20s and they have arthritis, you can do so many walk pole routines. They're incredibly valuable. There's all kinds of routines in my book and my online course, but the point is you could do a ground pole routine every single day. It's a different taxation on the muscular system than trot or canter poles. Those patterns we would do only once or twice a week. But once walk poles, you could certainly do some variation, up to 10, 15 reps every day if you wanted to with your older horse, even if they have arthritis. So, don't overlook the value of walk routines, whether you're online or you're riding them. But that's without knowing these individual horses, that's like my general suggestion is keep poles on the ground, really lean into the walk routines. And, in cases where you can really get clear on how progressed or severe the arthritis is, then, do that because that really does help us tailor exercises because there is still plenty that horses with arthritis can do. As I said, it's sort of an it depends situation. So I'm going to wrap up there. And for those of you that, like I say, if you want to submit a question for next week, a lot of you reach out to me through Facebook or my email. And so I'll be pulling questions from there. And we can jump on here again in the live chat and answer your questions on, fitness related or whatever you're up to. Cool place to come together. And again, I want to thank Redmond Equine, and we will use my code JECB20 for 20% off. And we will